Good evening, everybody. Hi, my name is Melissa Buckley. As a nonprofit leader, one consistent need is recruiting volunteers that share the same passion and have the skills that our organizations need. Tonight, I'm going to talk to you about the best volunteer recruitment experience that I had around a kitchen table. And I'm going to leave you with 4 guiding principles that you can use to build your own kitchen table team. One thing that I've noticed over the last 10 or so years is that volunteer recruitment has become more and more difficult. So I did a little bit of research to find out if there was data that supported these anecdotal observations, and it turns out there is. One study I found is a 2018 study from the School of Public Policy at the University of Maryland. And they found that volunteer rates have been declining dramatically since the early 2000s. Another interesting fact that I found was that 1 out of 4 people don't volunteer because, quote, no one asked them. And we're going to focus on that aspect tonight. So why am I up here talking about this? When my girls were little, I decided to start volunteering at our church and at their school, their elementary schools. Those volunteer roles turned into leadership opportunities, and I ended up the PTO president at Lyons Elementary School, and then a few years later, the PTO president at Barrington High School, as well as having other leadership roles in my church and community. Over that time period, I was on or chaired multiple nominating committees. So I gathered a lot of experience. And then most recently, I was the founding board president for Be Strong Together, where we had to recruit an executive board, a board of directors, and volunteers to execute our programs. Along the way, I met and became friends with people I never would have gotten to know. I was also able to use my professional skills that I'd put aside for a time. And along the way, I found that I had a passion and a deep caring for families and teens and children with mental health issues and general wellness. And that gave me a focus, and it led to some opportunities within the community that I would not have otherwise had. And they all started from this small role at my child's elementary school. So what am I going to talk about tonight? We're going to talk about first my best volunteer recruitment experience ever, which was around a kitchen table. And we're going to talk about what we can learn from that experience. And then finally, I'll give you some tips on building your recruitment team. My best volunteer recruitment experience. We have to teleport back to about 2005. I was asked, along with about 6 or 7 other people, to be on the Lyons School nominating committee. And this was a group of people from different neighborhoods, and we all had kids at different ages in the school. The first part of the process was very pen and paper based. We would send a form home to parents in kids' backpacks, and then parents would fill out that form with preference information and then send it back to the school. And then someone from our committee would aggregate all that information into a spreadsheet. We would have a list of all of the roles that we needed, all the roles that were filled, and then the roles that weren't filled. And that's where this nominating committee really had to do our work. So we were asked to come to someone's house, and we were asked to bring our cell phone and our school directory. And we sat around their kitchen table and got to work. And the first thing that we did was look at the spreadsheet and figure out what roles needed to be filled. And we got out those directories and used the knowledge of our neighbors, our children's friends, parents, anybody that we knew that was a part of the school community, and brainstormed on who might be good for these roles. And we were able to bounce ideas off of each other. And once we had some ideas, people would literally get up from the table, use their cell phone, and make a phone call saying, you know, hi, it's Melissa. I'm at the nominating committee meeting, and your name came up. Would you be interested in this role? And we would usually get a yes or a no. And if you got a yes, it was like, great, we can check that off the list. If you got a no, we'd go back to the group and say, okay, he said no, but is there somebody else that we can think of? And it was a very efficient process. In 2 or 3 hours, we got 90 to 95% of all this work done. And I participated in a group like this for 3 or 4 years, so I felt like it was very efficient. So what could we learn from that experience? First, that paper and pen process that I talked about has been moved online, I'll say. And organizations now are using like Google Forms or Volunteer Spot or Sign Up Genius, or maybe they have a form on their website, or they're getting information out via, say, a newsletter or an email blast. And that is great. Use all of those tools. It's a great way to get what I'll call low-hanging fruit. Those volunteers that are already involved with your organization and people that are already engaged. But what about the people that haven't raised their hand? This is where your team comes into play. First, use a team. Get a group of people together. You can call it a group or a committee, whatever you want. But a group of people, 6 or 7, is a lot better than 1 or 2. Especially if you have a lot of volunteers. 1 or 2 people, it's just not going to be as productive. A group can bounce ideas off of each other. So use a team and expand your reach. Our group made sure that we had people from different neighborhoods and from different grade levels. Your organization is going to be different. You may be able to use gender or location or professional skills, things like that. It'll vary based on your organization. So use a team, expand your reach, do the work on the spot. We sat around that table and brainstormed, and then we got up and we made those phone calls. We did the work right then and there, so we could cross things off the list or work together and brainstorm some more. And finally, a personal ask is critical. And I think this is probably the most important thing I want to leave you with tonight. People want to be asked. Remember the statistic that I gave back at the beginning? 1 in 4 people don't volunteer because they haven't been asked. This can be a personal phone call. It can be a meeting, especially if maybe you're asking for a larger role or if there's very specific skills you need. A personal meeting might be more appropriate. But either way, if you're talking to them on the phone or meeting with them individually, you can then tell them why you care about this organization. Why are you involved in it? What does it mean to you? And why do you think they would be good at filling the role that you need? No matter what the role, though, a personal ask is always important. People want to feel needed and they want to feel valued. I have a couple things I want to touch on real quickly. One is talking about where you can get other ideas for volunteers, and the other is how to volunteer yourself. If you're not part of an organization that has a captive audience, like parents at an elementary school, where else can you look for potential volunteers? One way is a membership list. If your organization has members, that's a great place. Another place is if you host or sponsor events, keep track of the people that attend your events and what their contact information is. People that are attending your events repeatedly might be a potential volunteer, someone who wants to get involved behind the scenes. Another idea are financial donors. People donate to organizations that they care about. Maybe they'd be willing to give their time and talents. So see who's been donating to you over a regular period of time and see if maybe they might be interested in helping as well. Now, in terms of volunteering yourself, it doesn't always happen that an organization is soliciting volunteers at the time when you're ready to volunteer. So don't be afraid to raise your hand. If you're at an event, approach somebody and ask them if they need help. If you get something in a newsletter that strikes you, email them back. Use their online volunteer form. Reach out. Rarely will an organization say no to a volunteer. And leaders, if you do have a form online or you do have a generic email address, make sure that someone is monitoring those and getting information to the right people. There's nothing worse than hearing that somebody tried to volunteer and the organization never got back to them. So, how do you build your own kitchen table team? First, define your volunteer needs. Make sure that you have a comprehensive list of what volunteer roles you need to fill. Second, gather your data. Get all those lists that we talked about, whether it's a student's parent list, a donor list, a membership list. Get all that information together so your team has it available. Set expectations with your team. Make sure they know what they're in for and what you're expecting of them. Do you expect them just to come and brainstorm with you, or do you want them to make that personal ask on the phone? Some people are hesitant to do that. I can't tell you how many times I've done that for someone and just called someone I don't know and said, hey, this organization I work with is looking for volunteers, and your name came up a couple of different times. I'm wondering if I can talk to you about it and see if you might be interested in a role. It gets easier to do when you do it over time. In summary, get your diverse team together to expand your potential pool of volunteers. And then don't delay. Get started by making that personal contact when your team is together. Around the kitchen table, that's optional. Thank you.